This is day 2 of my 365-day commitment, the year-long reading plan of the Bible. I started on September 1st, 2025, which is a Monday. Today is September 2nd, 2025, Tuesday. Tuesday. And I today read, according to the reading plan, chapter 4, verse 1, Cain and Abel, and ending on genealogy of the patriarchs, chapter 5, verse 32. So, two really key takeaways. One, very interesting that there is a really big emphasis on this genealogy of the patriarchs section. And we have, starting with Adam, we have all of the descendants of his who had sons. And then we go all the way from Adam and we kind of end on Lamech, I think, and Noah. And so it's really interesting because out of all those individuals, for each verse, it says that they lived, and they lived a very long time, like we're talking 800 years sort of thing, and then that they died. So they lived, they had the sons and daughters, they died. And that's the pattern. And then it's really interesting because then it says that Enoch walked with God. So instead of saying, and he died, it says, and he was not. And so for each of these other individuals, it says how long they lived, and then says, and he died, and he died, and he died, and he died. But for Enoch, it says, he walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. And I wrote down a little note to say, and he was not is very similar to saying, and he no longer was, which is very interesting because the Bible doesn't use the words, and he died. And so it still says that Enoch lived and then essentially was not alive anymore, but they don't use the words, and he died. The words used are, and he was not. And that makes me think of being. So all of these other individuals died. And so we associate that with the return to the earth, as God had ordained or commanded that that's what would happen to Adam because of the sin back in the Garden of Eden. And yet for Lamech, it says, and the difference here is that he is the only one that is listed in this whole list of patriarchs in this genealogy. And it says he walked with God. And then because he walked with God, when it was his time to leave, he was not, aka, and he no longer was, which I see this as almost like him, Enoch, disappearing, kind of like being and then not being anymore, and not being here physically. Whereas for everybody else, it says they died. So, which would mean more of that kind of concrete understanding that they returned back to the earth. And so that was the first observation. And then the second observation is that it says, so the second observation is that all the patriarchs have 3 things in common, except Enoch. And that those things in common are they all die. They are no longer, so all the patriarchs have 3 things in common. They all die, except Enoch. They all have a long life, and they don't walk with God. And Enoch has the shortest life, and Enoch has the shortest life, and he walks with God, and then he doesn't die. He just kind of ceases to be, and God takes care of that. And so that was an observation of mine, that Enoch was, because he walked with God, it's this indication that God took care of him because of his devotion to God, to the Creator. And so it's an interesting and a deep read because the Bible is such an intricate and a deep read. I found myself already needing to reread sections more than once. And so I'm pretty sure I'll come across even more of a greater understanding of what some of these sections mean and some of the analogies. But I particularly found it very interesting to see this genealogy of the patriarchs, specifically because of of the amount of people mentioned and the amount of the longevity, right? These individuals are said to live for hundreds and hundreds of years. So I'm very curious about anybody else's theories or what's kind of said out there about what that could mean. But I will continue to read on because tomorrow is day 3 of 365 of reading the Bible and my year-long commitment plan. So my name is Philippa, and I will see you soon.